The moon hung low over the Carpathian Mountains, bathing the land in an eerie silver glow. A thick fog rolled through the ancient forest, whispering secrets only the damned could understand. Deep within the heart of this cursed land stood Castle Dracula, a monolithic fortress of stone and shadow. Within its cold, winding halls, the Count sat upon his throne, his crimson eyes piercing the darkness. Dracula had ruled for centuries, unchallenged, unrivaled. Yet, the world had begun to change. The old gods faded, their heroes little more than dust on forgotten battlefields. But one name still echoed through time, whispered by those who remembered the age of monsters and men: Beowulf. An old scholar, trembling before the vampire lord, dared to speak. "My lord, this warrior is not like the others. He has slain creatures of the abyss, beings of strength and fury. If there is one who could stand against you..." Dracula's laughter cut through the air like a blade. "Then let him come." He stood, his presence filling the chamber with an aura of death. "I have conquered empires, feasted on kings. This Beowulf is but another tale to be rewritten." Far away, beyond the reach of night, a restless warrior stood by the roaring sea. Beowulf, the legend of Geatland, had grown old, but time had not withered his strength nor dulled his instincts. He stared into the horizon, his heart yearning for battle, for glory. A storm brewed in the heavens, an omen of fate. That night, as Beowulf sat in the great hall of his kingdom, an unfamiliar wind swept through the doors. A messenger, pale and gaunt, stepped forward. His voice was like rusted iron. "Mighty Beowulf, a darkness beyond measure has risen in the east. A creature of the night, whose very name strikes fear into those who speak it." Dracula. Silence claimed the hall. Beowulf clenched his fists, feeling the fire of youth ignite in his veins. He had battled beasts of the deep, demons of the land, and dragons of the sky. He would not falter now. "Then I shall go to him," he declared. "For if this beast truly believes himself greater than Grendel, greater than the serpent of fire, then let him test his strength against the might of Beowulf." The journey was long, the sea merciless, yet no force of nature could deter the warrior. He arrived upon the cursed shores of Transylvania, his presence a defiance against the land itself. The villagers whispered his name in awe and fear, warning him of the horrors that lay ahead. But he pressed on, ascending the treacherous mountain path toward the castle that loomed like a specter above the land. The night was heavy when he arrived. The great doors of Castle Dracula creaked open, as though the fortress itself invited him inside. Beowulf stepped forward unafraid, his sword gleaming in the dim torchlight. The air was thick with death, yet he pressed on, his every step a declaration of war. At last, he entered the great hall, and there, upon a throne of blackened bone, sat Dracula, his presence consuming the space like a living shadow. The Count regarded his guests with a cruel smile. "So the old gods still send their champions. I expected more." Beowulf tightened his grip on his sword, eyes never leaving the vampire. "I have seen monsters far greater than you fall before my blade." Dracula rose from his throne, his every movement fluid and human. "Then let us see if you are worthy of the legend you claim." The night air crackled with anticipation. The battle had begun. The air grew heavy, thick with the weight of ancient power. The flickering torches lining the castle walls cast elongated shadows that danced like wraiths. Beowulf and Dracula stood poised, two legends of different worlds, separated only by the thin veil of anticipation. Dracula was the first to move. He did not lunge like a beast, nor strike like a desperate man. He disappeared into the darkness, his form melting into the very fabric of the night. Beowulf's eyes narrowed as he turned his head, listening for the telltale whisper of shifting air. Then, a rush of wind. Dracula reappeared behind him, claws extended. Beowulf spun with warrior's instinct, his sword flashing in the dim light. The blade met empty air as Dracula vanished once more. A ghostly chuckle echoed through the hall. "You fight shadows, old warrior. Beowulf's jaw tightened. He had faced foes with unnatural gifts before, creatures that lurk beneath the waves and in the abyss of the world. He steadied his breathing, focusing not on what his eyes could see, but on what his warrior's heart could sense. Dracula struck again, this time from above, descending like a vulture upon its prey. Beowulf raised his sword, catching the vampire's strike in a resounding clash of steel and claw. Sparks flew as the warrior pushed back with sheer strength, sending Dracula skidding across the marble floor. The vampire lord did not rise immediately. Instead, he lifted his head with amusement, wiping a thin line of blackened blood from his lips. Interesting, he mused. You are more than just an aging warrior. But tell me, Beowulf, how do you slay that which does not die? Beowulf did not answer. Instead, he charged. His movements, honed by decades of battle, carried him forward with the force of a thunderclap. Dracula sidestepped, his speed otherworldly, but this time Beowulf anticipated it. He twisted his blade mid-swing, carving a deep gash into Dracula's side. The vampire hissed, stumbling back. For the first time in centuries, he felt pain, real and biting. His crimson eyes glowed with fury as he straightened, his body already beginning to mend. Impressive, he admitted, but let us see how long your mortal strength lasts. He raised his hand, and the castle responded. Shadows thickened, swirling like sentient smoke. The torches extinguished one by one, leaving only the pale light of the moon through stained glass windows. Beowulf stood undeterred, his grip tightening on his sword. Then the darkness attacked. Dracula had become one with the abyss, striking from all directions. Claws raked across Beowulf's armor. Fangs snapped dangerously close to his throat. Yet, the warrior did not falter. He swung with practiced might, each blow carving through mist and shadow alike. His mind was steel, his will unbreakable. Minutes passed like hours, and still they fought. The great hall bore the scars of their battle. Cracked stone, shattered pillars, trails of blood both red and black. Beowulf, though powerful, could feel the weight of time pressing upon him. Dracula, however, only grew stronger, feeding on the night itself. And then, in a flash of movement, Dracula struck true. His clawed hand found Beowulf's side, piercing through the warrior's armor, through flesh and bone. Beowulf gasped, staggering, but did not fall. He responded with a mighty swing that forced Dracula back, but the damage had been done. Blood seeped from the wound, staining the stone beneath his feet. Dracula smirked. The night is young, old warrior, and I have all the time in the world. Beowulf gritted his teeth, pressing a hand against his wound. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in his life, he faced an enemy whose endurance might outmatch his own. The clash of titans would rage on. The great hall of Castle Dracula lay in ruins. Pillars crumbled, stained glass windows shattered, and the stone floor was slick with blood, both red and black. Beowulf, mighty and unyielding, stood wounded but defiant. His breathing was ragged, his grip on his sword tightening as he faced the unrelenting force of Dracula, who loomed before him, unscathed by time, growing stronger with every passing moment. Dracula's crimson eyes gleamed in the darkness. You are formidable, Beowulf, he said, voice smooth as silk. But your strength wanes. You have fought well, perhaps better than any mortal, but you cannot win. Beowulf, though bleeding, gave a fierce grin. I have faced death before, and still I stand. If this is my final battle, then let it be one that echoes through the ages. With a mighty roar, Beowulf charged once more. His blade, ancient and battle-worn, slashed through the air, carving through the shadows that Dracula commanded. Each strike was driven by centuries of warrior instinct, but for every cut he landed, Dracula retaliated with unnatural speed and precision. The vampire lord moved like mist, vanishing and reappearing, striking at Beowulf from every direction. A devastating blow landed. Dracula's claws raked across Beowulf's chest, tearing through armor and flesh alike. Beowulf stumbled, his vision blurring for the first time in battle. He fell to one knee, gripping his sword like a lifeline. Dracula stepped forward, towering over his wounded foe. "Your legend ends tonight, warrior." Beowulf spat blood onto the cold stone floor. Legends never die. Summoning the last reserves of his strength, he drove his sword forward, aiming for Dracula's heart. But the vampire was faster. In one swift motion, he caught the blade mid-thrust, the steel hissing as it met his immortal flesh. With a vicious twist, he wrenched the weapon from Beowulf's grasp and cast it aside. Beowulf, disarmed and weakened, struggled to rise. But Dracula moved with the swiftness of night itself. His hand shot forward, gripping the warrior's throat, lifting him effortlessly from the ground. Beowulf struggled, but his strength had finally reached its limit. "You were a worthy adversary," Dracula whispered. "But this is the fate of all who defy the night." With a final, merciless strike, Dracula sank his fangs into Beowulf's neck. The warrior gasped, his body convulsing as the life drained from him. His vision darkened, his legendary strength fading into the abyss. As the last breath escaped his lips, the mighty Beowulf, slayer of monsters, hero of Geatland, fell. Dracula let the lifeless body drop to the ground, stepping back to admire his victory. The castle walls trembled, as though recognizing the end of an era. The night had won. The vampire lord turned towards a shattered window, gazing at the full moon. "The old gods are gone and their heroes with them," he murmured. "Now, only the darkness remains." The battle had been won, and Dracula stood victorious. The legend of Beowulf, however, would live on, whispered in the wind, forever remembered as a warrior who fought the night and fell.